Can LSU make a run in 2025 after a somewhat disappointing season in 2024? We're going to break down the schedule, give you a very early projected record for the Tigers. But yeah, let's start with that 2025 schedule. LSU's schedule in 2025 will be very similar to the 2024 schedule. Of course, in the SEC, the home and away just flipped. And then in the non-conference, they do have another big non-conference game. So remember last year they played USC. This year they will travel to Clemson. So in the non-conference, they'll play Clemson on the road. They'll play Louisiana Tech, Southeastern Louisiana, and Western Kentucky. Again, a very similar non-conference this year. I would say this Clemson game, though, is going to be tougher than the USC game from last year. I think Clemson's going to be a better team. And then obviously playing a true road game versus a neutral site game. That's going to be a really tough matchup. And really, that might be, besides Ohio State and Texas, that might be the game that I'm most excited for in the non-conference, at least there in week one. So that's going to be a great game. Can't wait to see how that one plays out. Let's look at who they play home and away. So in the SEC this year, they'll play Florida, South Carolina, Texas A&M, and Arkansas at home. Good getting those games at home because really Florida, South Carolina, Texas A&M, those are all going to be very good teams, and you want to play them at home. And we all know how tough it is to beat LSU at LSU. So I think that bodes well for them. I think they have, I think you'd rather have these games at home than what they had last year, because you look at who they play on the road. It's Ole Miss, Vanderbilt, Alabama, and Oklahoma. Ole Miss, maybe they take a bit of a step back this year, so that's a game you might could win on the road. Vanderbilt, I know Vanderbilt was a surprise team, but still LSU's a much better team. They should be able to take care of business in that game. Alabama, I know it's Alabama, but this is not the same Alabama we have seen in, the Nick Saban era is over. I don't know how good Alabama's going to really be. And then Oklahoma, Oklahoma's going to be, I think, improved, but still, that's a game LSU might be able to win. So all four of these road games will be tough for sure, but they're winnable games for LSU. And then, you do get some big games at home, Florida, South Carolina, and Texas A&M. So I would say it's probably a pretty even trade, but I think I'd rather have those three games at home this year, and Arkansas as well, a team that can sometimes give LSU some trouble. So that's the home and away. Let's go game by game. They'll start off with that road game at Clemson on August 30th. Then they'll play Louisiana Tech on September 6th. And then it's Florida at home September 13th. So a very early season game there. It seems like they used to play a little bit earlier in the year, and then more recently they played later in the year. I can't remember exactly, but that'll be a huge game. Huge game. The winner of that game is going to have a real shot to make a run in the SEC. The loser, I think, is going to be tough for them when you look at the rest of the schedules for these two teams. They got Southeastern Louisiana on September 20th, and then it's a road game at Ole Miss on September 27th. So when they go into that first bye week, they will have already played Clemson and Ole Miss on the road, and then also would have had that big game against Florida. So three big games in their first five, and that's really going to set the tone for the season. You lose a couple of those, it's going to be really, really tough when you look at the rest of the schedule. So I think they need to at least get off to a 4-1 start to keep themselves with a good chance to maybe make a run in the SEC and, of course, in the college football playoff. So they'll play South Carolina on October 11th at home. That's going to be a big game. That was a great game last year. Can't wait to see what happens this year. But again, I would not bet against LSU playing at home most games. They usually find a way to win those games. Vandy on the road on October 18th, then back home for Texas A&M October 25th. So only 3 games here in between the bye weeks, and 2 of them are at home. So you like LSU's chances to maybe win all 3 of those games. And then you look at the rest of that schedule, it's manageable. They're going to have some tough road games in here, but it's manageable. You've got Alabama on November 8th. That'll be on the road, so obviously that's going to be a tough one. Arkansas on the 15th. Then it's Western Kentucky on November 22nd. And they close things out with a road game at Oklahoma. Oklahoma, again, is a team that I expect to be improved this year. Arkansas, not too sure. Alabama, not too sure if they're going to go up or down or be about the same. But yeah, I really think those first 5 games, and 3 of those first 5 games, Clemson, Florida, Ole Miss, that's going to really determine the season. They don't have any really tough back-to-backs at all, because even those 3 games, Clemson, Florida, Ole Miss, they're separated with an easier game in between, and then they have the bye week after. So the toughest probably 3-game stretch is South Carolina, Vandy, and Texas A&M. And again, 2 of those games at home. Vanderbilt, one of the weaker teams in the SEC, is on the road. But still, I really like the way this schedule sets up in terms of the timing of the games if LSU is ready to go early in the season. Now, that's going to be the challenge, because if this team is one of those teams that has to get better as the season goes along, the season could be over by the time they get to October with 3 really tough games in September. So how does this stack up with the other teams in the SEC? Well, you look at their opponents for this year, their winning percentages from last season, the winning percentage from all the teams that they play in the SEC, 32-32 is the record last year, a 50% win percentage. So right there in the middle of the pack. It's a tough schedule, but it's not the toughest. So it's kind of in the middle. Anytime you play in the SEC, you're going to have a tough schedule, and then you add in a road game with Clemson. So that does make this schedule overall for LSU pretty tough in 2025. Before we get to the projected record for LSU, just want to let you guys know that we do have an LSU channel. If you're an LSU fan, check it out. Subscribe. You'll see a link pop up on your screen. Also, there will be a link down in the description below. So again, LSU fans, help us out. Go subscribe to our LSU channel. What will LSU's projected record be in 2025? Well, let's look first back at some of the projections, at least from the last 4 years that we've done. This is with our projection formula. This is not from our actual predictions, but you can see the projection in 2021, 8-4. They went 6-6 in 2022, projected to go 7-5. They went 9-3. 2023, 10-2. Was the projection. They went 9-3, and then last season projected to go 9-3. They went 8-4. So out of the past 4 seasons, our projection has actually overrated LSU 3 out of the 4 seasons. So 7-5 to 9-3 in 2022. That's the only year where LSU outperformed the projections. The last 2 years, they finished 1 game under our projection. So that's something to look at. But let's get to this, the new projection for 2025. And here is the schedule, and this is the scale that we use. So again, this is all based off of our tier rankings, and I do have LSU into tier 2. I'm projecting them, so they were like a tier 3 team last year, projecting them to jump into tier 2 with all the pieces they have coming back, the talent they have on the roster. So again, they did jump up a tier. So that means if they play another tier 2 team, then that's going to be a 50-50 game. It'll be in the white. If they play a tier 3 team, it'll be a 61-70% game. It'll be in the purple. But if they play a tier 3 team on the road like Oklahoma, then that changes it to a 50-50 game. So that's the way the formula works. And again, this is not based off of point spreads or trying to project point spreads, but one way to look at it, usually the games in the white are games where you would expect the spreads to be 3, 4, 5 points, 61-70, more like a touchdown spread, 71-80. Double-digit spread, and then over 80, we're talking like 20+ point spreads, something like that. So you got some of those. You got a few easy wins: Louisiana Tech, Southeastern Louisiana, and Western Kentucky. And all these games are not the same. Southeastern Louisiana is like 99.9%. Louisiana Tech's probably 96%. Western Kentucky maybe closer to 90%, but still. They're all above 80, and those are the games that we consider to be pretty easy wins, and those games are counted as wins in the formula. So 3 wins for LSU that you can pretty much guarantee. And then you've got Arkansas. They're actually in the blue. They are a tier 4 team, and the game's at home. So that's why this is in that 71-80% range. That again, if you go by the point spread, that would mean double-digit spread. I don't know. That's a tough one. I don't know exactly how good Arkansas is going to be. You look at the game from last year, and at LSU, you would think, yeah, LSU probably will be a double-digit favorite. But again, it's not based on that. It's just based off of our tier rankings, and that's where they fall in the formula. So 71-80%. There against Arkansas. Another tier 4 team that they play is Vanderbilt, but that game is on the road. That's why it drops into the purple. So 61-70% chance that they win that game. Yeah, I could see that. I could see LSU as an 8 or 9 point favorite in this game. So I think that does work out pretty well in terms of matching up with the point spreads. So you got 4 games where LSU is going to be, or excuse me, 5 games where they're going to be a pretty clear favorite. Again, not necessarily huge favorites, but pretty clear favorites in these 5 games. And then you've got 7 more games. And these other 7 games, there's really not a game where LSU, I think, is going to be a big underdog, but they will be an underdog in some of them. I think they'll be an underdog against Clemson, potentially Ole Miss, Alabama on the road. Those three for sure. I think they're probably favored against Florida, South Carolina, Texas A&M at home, and maybe favored against Oklahoma. So, yeah, those are all, though, games that are 50-50 games. And the reason why, well, Clemson, they're in Tier 2. Florida in Tier 2. Ole Miss in Tier 2. South Carolina, Texas A&M. All of these teams are in Tier 2 except for Oklahoma. They're Tier 3, but that game's on the road. So you can see a lot of games that could go either way for LSU. So their season could really go one way or the other in a pretty extremely. I mean, they could possibly lose all these games. I mean, they could go 5-7 or 6-6. It's not that crazy to think that could happen, but they could also get really hot and they could win pretty much all these games. They could get to 10-2 or 11-1 and make the college football playoffs. So LSU is going to be a team that is very tough to predict in terms of their final record. But if we're going by the odds and they just kind of split all these games, that's really what we do to get the projection. So if they split all these games, obviously that's 3.5 losses. And then there's a chance that they lose to Vanderbilt or Arkansas, and it comes out to 8-4. So that's the projection for LSU. I think that's a pretty fair projection. Same record as last year. If they take care of business in these games where they're favored, I think 9-3 is definitely very possible. If they really improve from where they were last year, perhaps they can get to 10-2. I look at them possibly going like 9-3 though, and maybe only having 2 conference losses. Let's say that one of those losses comes to Clemson, and they can maybe sneak into the SEC championship. So I think that's a possibility as well. But when you look at these 7 games, again, 4 of them on the road, that's going to be really tough. And so yeah, I do think 8-4 is a pretty fair projection for LSU in 2025. What do you guys think about LSU? What do you think their projections should be? Let me know down in the comments below. And just a reminder, memberships are now available. If you'd like to help support the channel, help us grow and do more things here, please become a member today.